December 20, 1943. 7,000 feet above Bremen, Germany. The frozen North Sea wind screams past Second Lieutenant Charles Chuck Yeager's canopy as tracer rounds slice through the air where his head was just a heartbeat before. His hands are shaking on the control stick. This is only his 8th combat mission. He's 19 years old. And in about 30 seconds he's going to be dead. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 locked onto his tail is flown by Lieutenant Ludwig Franziskett, a veteran Luftwaffe ace with 11 confirmed kills and 2 years of combat experience. Franziskett has hunted men through these skies since 1941. He knows every trick, every desperate move a pilot makes when death closes in. He's positioning for the killing shot right now, his cannon trained on the young American's engine cowling. By every calculation, every piece of training, every word in the tactical manual, Chuck Yeager should not survive the next half minute. The thing is, Chuck Yeager never read that part of the manual. This is the story of how a barely educated teenager from West Virginia accidentally revolutionized air combat by doing something so reckless, so fundamentally wrong by every measure, that senior officers would later dismiss his report as impossible. This is the story of the day the rules changed forever. To understand what's about to happen over Bremen, you need to understand just how badly things are going for American fighter pilots in the winter of 1943. The numbers are catastrophic. In August, during the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raids, the 8th Air Force lost 60 bombers in a single day. 600 men killed or captured in one mission. In October, another raid on Schweinfurt cost 62 more bombers. The loss rate on deep penetration missions is exceeding 20%, which means bomber crews have virtually no chance of surviving their required 25-mission tour. The mathematics are brutal and simple. You will almost certainly die before you go home. The problem is range. American P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings can escort the bombers to the German border, but they lack the fuel to penetrate deeper into Reich territory. Once the escorts turn back, Luftwaffe fighters swarm the bomber formations like wolves on wounded prey. The solution seems obvious: develop a long-range escort fighter. And North American aviation has delivered exactly that. The P-51 Mustang, sleek and deadly, with enough fuel capacity to reach Berlin and back. But there's a second problem, more insidious than the first. American fighter doctrine is fundamentally flawed. The tactics manual, written by senior officers who learned to fly in the 1920s, emphasizes formation flying and coordinated attacks. Fighter pilots are taught to maintain strict positioning, execute textbook maneuvers, never break formation discipline. Individual initiative is actively discouraged. The manual is treated like gospel. German pilots, meanwhile, are destroying American fighters using a completely different philosophy. Luftwaffe doctrine, refined through years of brutal combat over Spain, Poland, France, and Russia, emphasizes aggressive individual initiative. German aces like Adolf Galland and Gunther Rall have developed finger-four formations and energy fighting tactics that give them enormous advantages. The kill ratios tell the whole story. In late 1943, experienced Luftwaffe pilots are averaging 3 to 4 kills for every aircraft they lose. Some aces, like Egon Mayer and Walter Nowotny, have kill ratios exceeding 10 to 1. American fighter commanders know something is desperately wrong, but the solution eludes them. More training doesn't help. Stricter adherence to the manual doesn't help. The consensus among senior officers is clear. American pilots need better aircraft, more flight hours, stricter discipline. The tactics are sound. The problem must be execution. This assumption is about to be shattered by a kid who barely graduated high school. Charles Elwood Yeager isn't supposed to be here at all. He grows up in Hamlin, West Virginia, during the Great Depression. His family is poor in the way only Depression-era Appalachia understands. His father works in the coal mines and natural gas fields. Chuck hunts squirrels and rabbits to put actual food on the table, developing exceptional eyesight and hand-eye coordination in the process. He can spot a squirrel in a tree at 300 yards, which is the kind of skill you don't get from a classroom. He enlists in the Army Air Forces in September 1941 as an aircraft mechanic. No college education. No wealthy family connections. No prior flying experience whatsoever. He gets assigned to maintain P-39 Airacobras at Tonopah, Nevada, turning wrenches while other guys with college degrees climb into cockpits. In July 1942, facing a desperate pilot shortage, the Air Forces launches the Flying Sergeant program, allowing enlisted men to train as pilots without officer commissions. Yeager volunteers immediately. His superiors are skeptical. His educational background is marginal at best. Most washout candidates come from his demographic. He proves every single one of them wrong. At flight school in California and Arizona, Yeager demonstrates natural flying ability that instructors find genuinely remarkable. His vision is measured at 20/10, twice as acute as normal. He can spot enemy aircraft before anyone else in the formation, which will save his life more than once. He graduates in March 1943, receives his commission as a flight officer, and by November arrives in England, assigned to the 363rd Fighter Squadron, 357th Fighter Group. He has logged approximately 270 flight hours total. Most of his squadron mates have college degrees. Many come from wealthy families. Some have private pilot licenses from before the war. And Yeager is just the kid from West Virginia who talks with an Appalachian drawl and lacks social polish. He gets assigned P-51B Mustang number 43 to 6763. He names it Glamorous Glen, after his girlfriend back home, Glenys Dickhouse. On February 11, 1944, the 357th Fighter Group flies its first combat mission. 3 weeks later, on March 4, Yeager scores his first kill, a Messerschmitt Bf-109 during one of the first daylight bombing raids over Berlin. The very next day, March 5, his luck runs out. He's shot down near Bordeaux, France, trying to make a head-on pass at a group of Focke-Wulf 190s. He bails out over occupied territory, spends 2 months with the French resistance, crosses the Pyrenees Mountains into neutral Spain in knee-deep snow, and eventually makes it back to England. American pilots who escape occupied territory are normally forbidden from returning to combat. If they're captured again, they might betray members of the resistance under interrogation. But Yeager personally appeals to General Dwight Eisenhower himself for permission to return to combat. Eisenhower grants it. By December, Chuck Yeager is back in the cockpit. And on December 20, 1943, flying his 8th combat mission since returning to duty, everything changes forever. The mission briefing is routine. Escort B-17 bombers to Bremen, protect them during the bomb run, bring them home. Yeager climbs into Glamorous Glen, runs through his pre-flight checks, and takes off into the gray winter sky. The formation crosses the North Sea, enters German airspace. Anti-aircraft fire bursts in black puffs around the bombers. Radio chatter crackles. Bandits 2 o'clock high. Fighters inbound. The Luftwaffe arrives in force. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s diving out of the sun. The sky erupts into chaos. Aircraft wheeling, tracer fire stitching patterns through the clouds, engines screaming, voices shouting over the radio. Yeager engages a Bf-109, but the German pilot is good, experienced, and the dogfight deteriorates into a desperate turning battle. That's when Ludwig Franziskatt latches onto Yeager's tail. Franziskatt is a hunter. 11 kills. 2 years stalking Allied pilots through European skies. He positions his Bf-109 perfectly, closes the distance, fires a burst. Cannon shells rip past Yeager's canopy close enough that he can hear them over the Packard Merlin engine's roar. His fuel gauge is dropping fast. His ammunition counter shows just 60 rounds remaining. The nearest friendly aircraft is 3 miles away, which might as well be 300. Chuck Yeager's training is screaming at him. Maintain altitude, execute a standard evasive turn, try to reach friendly aircraft. Stay high where the Mustang has performance advantages. Every instinct says stay high. Standard doctrine is crystal clear on this. You maintain formation, execute coordinated attacks, never break away from your wingmen. The Army Air Forces has spent millions of dollars developing these tactics, and fighter groups practice them until they can fly them in their sleep, because survival depends on discipline and following the manual to the letter. Instead, Chuck Yeager does something completely insane. He rolls inverted and pulls the stick back hard, diving nearly vertical toward the German countryside 7,000 feet below. The airspeed indicator spins past 400 miles per hour, then past 450. The Mustang's wings begin to buffet as the aircraft approaches its structural limits. The dive angle is so steep that Yeager's vision begins to gray out from negative G-forces. This should be suicide. Everyone knows German fighters can outdive American aircraft. The Bf-109's fuel-injected engine gives it enormous advantages in negative G maneuvers. Diving away from a 109 is exactly what you're not supposed to do under any circumstances. But Chuck Yeager isn't thinking about doctrine right now. He's reacting like a West Virginia boy who's hunted his entire life. Using terrain. Using speed. Using every single advantage available. And something unexpected happens. The Mustang's Packard-built Merlin engine, with its 2-stage supercharger designed for high-altitude performance, performs differently than anyone expected at high speed. As Yeager screams toward the deck, the Mustang actually accelerates faster than the pursuing Bf-109. The airspeed hits 500 miles per hour. The controls are nearly locked solid from aerodynamic pressure. Franziskett follows, firing repeatedly, but his rounds are falling behind. The Mustang is pulling away. At 1,500 feet, Yeager hauls back on the stick with both hands. The G-forces slam him into his seat so hard his vision tunnels. The Mustang's wings flex upward, stressed nearly to failure. The aircraft bottoms out at 800 feet, traveling at 480 miles per hour. Franziskett tries to follow, but the Bf-109 pulls out higher at 600 feet, and the maneuver has bled off his energy. His airspeed has dropped to 320 miles per hour. Yeager levels out, looks back, and sees something that should not be physically possible. The German fighter that was about to kill him 30 seconds ago is now behind him, slow and vulnerable. Franziskett is desperately trying to regain speed and altitude. But it's too late. Yeager reverses, climbs slightly, positions himself behind the Bf-109. At 400 yards, he fires a 3-second burst. 50 caliber rounds tear into the German fighter's wing root and fuselage. The Bf-109 rolls left, trailing smoke, spirals toward the ground. Chuck Yeager has just executed the first recorded high-speed yo-yo maneuver in combat aviation history. And he doesn't even know that's what it's called. He doesn't fully understand what he's done. He just knows he survived when he absolutely should not have. When Yeager lands at RAF Leiston and reports the engagement to his squadron commander, the reaction is immediate and dismissive. "That's absolutely impossible," the commander says. "The 109 outperforms us in every dive scenario. You must have misidentified the aircraft type." The intelligence officer's report is deeply skeptical. The gun camera footage is inconclusive. The dive was too violent and the camera couldn't track properly. Several senior pilots review Yeager's account and dismiss it as confused memory from combat stress. "You simply cannot outdive a Messerschmitt," says Major Thomas Hayes, the group operations officer. "Their fuel injection system gives them decisive advantages in negative G maneuvers. This is established fact. The doctrine is absolutely clear. American fighters should maintain altitude advantage and use coordinated attacks. Diving away from enemy fighters is explicitly discouraged in the tactics manual." What Yeager describes violates fundamental principles that senior officers learned at the Air Corps Tactical School. They're not about to throw out years of training based on one confused report from a teenager with an 8th grade education. But Yeager isn't alone. Over the next 3 weeks, other pilots begin reporting similar experiences. Lieutenant William Wisner executes a near-vertical dive to escape 2 FW-190s and discovers the same phenomenon. At extreme speeds, the Mustang's performance characteristics change dramatically. Captain Don Blakesley, commander of the 4th Fighter Group and one of the most experienced American pilots in Europe, decides to investigate properly. On January 11, 1944, Blakesley takes a P-51B to 25,000 feet over the English Channel and executes a series of high-speed dive tests. The results are genuinely startling. Below 20,000 feet, in dives exceeding 450 miles per hour, the Mustang accelerates faster than any German fighter. The 2-stage supercharger, designed for high-altitude performance, creates unexpected advantages at high speed and low altitude. Blakesley writes a detailed report and submits it to 8th Fighter Command Headquarters. The response is immediate and hostile. At a commander's meeting on January 18, 1944, Blakesley presents his findings. The room erupts. Senior officers who've been flying since the 1920s are being told that fundamental assumptions about fighter combat are wrong. That a barely educated teenager from West Virginia has discovered something they completely missed. "This is reckless cowboy flying," says Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group. "We cannot abandon coordinated tactics for individual heroics. That's what gets pilots killed." "Your data is flawed," argues another colonel. "German fighters have fuel injection, we have carburetors. Physics doesn't lie." The meeting threatens to end with Blakesley's report being filed away and forgotten. Bureaucratic inertia is enormous. Changing doctrine requires admitting previous doctrine was wrong, and careers are built on the existing system. Then Major General William Kepner, commander of 8th Fighter Command, intervenes. Kepner is a maverick who learned to fly in 1916, flew combat missions in World War I, and has watched too many young pilots die following tactics that simply don't work. He's willing to challenge conventional wisdom if the evidence supports it. "Gentlemen," Kepner says, "I don't care if this contradicts everything we learned at tactical school. I care about kill ratios." Captain Blakesley's group has the highest success rate in the theater. If his pilots are surviving by breaking the rules, then maybe our rules are wrong. Kepner orders immediate testing. Over the next 2 weeks, test pilots put P-51s through extreme dive profiles. The data confirms Blakesley's findings completely. At speeds above 450 miles per hour, the Mustang's acceleration in a dive exceeds that of both the Bf-109 and the FW-190. On February 3, 1944, Kepner issues a revolutionary directive. Fighter pilots are now authorized to use individual initiative and aggressive tactics, including high-speed diving attacks. Formation discipline is de-emphasized. Pilots are actively encouraged to exploit the Mustang's high-speed performance. The old guard is absolutely appalled. But Kepner has the authority, and he uses it without hesitation. The new tactics are tested immediately during Big Week, a massive campaign launched on February 20, 1944, to destroy German aircraft production. Over 1,000 bombers strike targets deep in Germany, escorted by P-51 Mustangs flying with Kepner's new doctrine. The results speak for themselves. During Big Week, American fighters claimed 497 German aircraft destroyed. The loss ratio shifts dramatically in favor of the Americans. Pilots using high-speed diving attacks, the tactic Chuck Yeager accidentally discovered, are surviving engagements that would have killed them under the old doctrine. On October 12, 1944, Chuck Yeager achieves ace in a day status, shooting down 5 enemy aircraft in a single mission. He spots the German fighters 1.5 miles away, attacks with the sun at his back, using altitude advantage to build speed, then executes devastating high-speed diving attacks. 2 German pilots bail out immediately. Yeager closes on the next fighter and opens fire from 600 yards. Observed strikes all over the ship, particularly heavy in the cockpit, he later reports. He doesn't pursue the stricken plane because he spots another German fighter. This time he closes to just 100 yards and fires a 3-second burst. The whole fuselage split open and blew up. By the time World War II ends in Europe, Chuck Yeager has flown 64 combat missions and is credited with destroying 12.25 enemy aircraft in aerial combat. But his real contribution isn't measured in kills. It's measured in lives saved. The high-speed dive tactic he accidentally discovered changes American fighter doctrine forever. Pilots who would have died following the old manual survive because one scared teenager from West Virginia did something everyone said was impossible. After the war, Yeager becomes a test pilot. On October 14, 1947, over California's Mojave Desert, he pilots the Bell X-1 to a speed of Mach 1.06, 700 miles per hour, becoming the first man ever to break the sound barrier in level flight. He continues pushing boundaries, testing the limits of what's possible, until he retires as a brigadier general in 1975, having accumulated more than 10,000 hours in 361 different types and models of aircraft. Chuck Yeager passed away on December 7, 2020, at the age of 97. But on December 20, 1943, he was just a 19-year-old kid with shaking hands and 60 rounds of ammunition, staring at certain death over Bremen, Germany. And in the 30 seconds that followed, he did something so reckless, so fundamentally wrong by every measure, that it saved thousands of lives and changed aerial warfare forever. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you're too young, too scared, or too desperate to know what the rules say you can't do. Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts, dive toward the ground at 500 miles per hour, and pray to God the wings don't rip off. And sometimes, just sometimes, the kid who never read the manual rewrites it for everyone else.